Good evening. I'm Gabe Gutierrez in for Tom Llamas. We begin tonight with President Biden's COVID diagnosis. The president posting this video to Twitter, reassuring Americans that he's only experiencing mild symptoms, that he's feeling okay, and that he's still working. At 79, he is the country's oldest president. But White House coronavirus response coordinator Dr. Ashish Jha says Biden is taking an antiviral drug to prevent severe illness. The vice president and first lady both considered close contacts, but the White House has not said if anyone in the president's inner circle has tested positive. So let's get right to NBC News chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander, who leads us off tonight.
Tonight, hours after the White House announced he tested positive for COVID, President Biden posting this video.
Hey folks, guess you heard this morning I tested positive for COVID. But I've been double vaccinated, double boosted. Symptoms are mild, and I really appreciate your inquiries and your concerns. But I'm doing well. I'm getting a lot of work done. I'm going to continue to get it done. And in the meantime, thanks for your concern and keep the faith. It's going to be okay.
The president's doctor writing Mr. Biden has a runny nose, fatigue, and an occasional dry cough, which started yesterday evening, and that he's being treated with the antiviral drug Paxlovid. The president now working from isolation in the residence, the White House saying he'll stay there until he tests negative. The White House says they don't know where the president became infected. Just yesterday, he was on the road in Massachusetts. The first lady traveling in Michigan has been identified as a close contact to her husband.
He's doing fine. He's feeling good. I tested negative this morning. I am going to keep my schedule. I am, according to CDC guidelines, I am keeping masked.
But we asked about the president's decision to record his video unmasked.
Should Americans who are positive for COVID, if they are in public or in any place at any time, always wear a mask?
So the CDC guidance on this is clear. People should isolate, and they should, if they're going to be in close contact with anybody else, they should definitely be wearing a mask. The president was more than 6 feet away from the camera person, who was wearing an N95. So I think it was, from a safety point of view, very safe thing to do.
The White House has taken significant steps to avoid the president contracting COVID, including requiring a negative test for anyone scheduled to meet with him. At 79, President Biden is America's oldest president, and today's diagnosis comes amid a growing focus on his age and health. An NBC News poll earlier this year found just 33% of Americans give him high marks for having the necessary mental and physical health to be president. 50% of Americans give him low marks. Today, the White House downplayed the level of concern with the president's illness, despite his age.
Given how much immunity he has from vaccines, given that he was started on treatments right away, I think all of those things very dramatically reduce his risk of serious illness. And that's really the goal here.
And Peter Alexander joins us now from the White House. And Peter, tonight we've also learned the vice president has been identified as a close contact.
Gabe, I'm told the vice president tested negative just this morning. President Biden, for his part, canceled a scheduled trip to Pennsylvania today, and we're told that the first lady is traveling to the couple's Delaware home tonight without her husband. Gabe.
Peter Alexander at the White House. Peter, thank you. And for more on the president's COVID diagnosis, let's bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar. Thank you so much, doctor, for joining us here on Top Story. Now, as we just heard Peter mention in the piece, the president experiencing mild symptoms at this point, but he's 79 years old. That's a major risk factor. How concerned are you for his diagnosis moving forward, given his age?
Yeah, you know, Gabe, this is how I think about it. Not all 79-year-olds are created equal. There's a lot that goes into one's, overall health status when you're pushing 80 years old. And by all accounts, he's got a couple of medical issues, some atrial fibrillation, elevated cholesterol, both of which are being very well controlled with medication. He's not otherwise immunocompromised or has other underlying medical conditions that we know pose a risk for severe outcomes. And he's had 4 vaccinations. So he's very well positioned, if you will, and there was obviously a great likelihood that he was going to get infected at some point. Right now the virus is behaving exactly as we know it will. It's making him feel kind of yucky, but causing mostly upper respiratory symptoms, and I hope it stays that way. Should he develop more significant disease, obviously now where, as opposed to even 2 years ago, we have very effective treatments should he need to be hospitalized. So I think he's going to do just fine. But of course, the first couple of days, they're always watching and waiting just to make sure that no one takes a turn for the worse.
And doctor, we don't know yet what strain the president has.
That's correct.
Of course, but as we've been hearing, this highly transmissible BA.5 variant really is spreading across the country. What do you think that's going to mean moving forward for his administration? Are we looking at more masking again? I know so many Americans are reluctant to do that at this point, but how does this look like over the coming months?
You know, here's we as a country, and maybe as a world really, are in a little bit of a double bind, because on the one hand, the virus appears to have mutated to become much more transmissible, but not necessarily more virulent, right? So it's not causing more severe disease, and it's doing this so it can survive, right? If it becomes more virulent, it's going to kill its host. It doesn't want to do that. So it's behaving exactly the way we thought it would. But the problem, Gabe, is that death isn't the only outcome. We still have long COVID. We have people who are hospitalized who have, sequelae from having had COVID-19. So it's not the common cold yet. And I think that's where there's sort of a little bit of a tension between, look, if I get it, I'm probably going to be fine. I just want to go and live my life with, at the same time, it's not a cold yet. So we're walking a very fine line. I don't know what the next 6 months are going to bring. Nobody really does. But I would say that as we've drilled into people, if you're otherwise reasonably healthy and you're vaccinated, you should go out and enjoy your life. But you also need to use common sense. And if you're in a crowded indoor place and you don't want to get infected, you got to put that mask on. You have to be thinking about the consequences of infection for yourself and also the people around you.
Dr. Azar, thank you for joining Top Story. Now to the other major headline we're following tonight. This brutal heat wave we've been suffering through is going to be around for days in many places. Dasha Burns has more on the impact, and it's not just on people.
Tonight, a brutal heat wave baking much of the country.
It is hot.
98 million Americans under heat alerts. The South setting new daily records. El Paso, Texas at 108. And Lawton, Oklahoma at a steamy 111. In Missouri, a major heat wave is roasting ranches and farms across the Great Plains, endangering livestock and crops.
Humidity and high temps, that's the death sentence for cattle.
Come on, girl.
Veteran-owned and operated Casey Cattle Company doing all they can to protect their cows.
How do you actually keep these girls cool?
Well, the animals really kind of do most of it themselves. You just give them the ability and the elements they need.
Those key elements: space, shade, grass, and lots of water. Steve Fry of Weston Red Barn Farm also worried about the cows and the cost.
The real pressure right now is on feed, grass. Right now, a round bale is going for $35 to $45.
And it's not just cattle. The extreme heat can disrupt this critical time for crops like the soybeans and pumpkins here.
This plant will wither, the leaves will curl up.
Entire ecosystems are impacted by extreme heat.
This is our pumpkin crop. These bees have to visit this plant numerous times to produce a nice sized pumpkin.
And the heat messes with that.
The heat does mess with it. They don't want to fly in this hot weather because they're protecting the hive.
Large parts of Kansas and Missouri are also experiencing drought conditions. Steve has spent 33 seasons on this farmland. He says a lot has changed in that time.
The extremes are so much greater now. The highs and lows of whether it's volume of rain or temperature, it's so much greater. It's unpredictable, but it's really a joy when you bring your crop in.
But it's a little more work than it used to be.
It is a lot more work than it used to be, a lot more worry.
And Dasha Burns joins us now live from Weston, Missouri, and we can see some of that cattle in the shot behind you. Dasha, how will this burden on farmers play out for consumers?
Well, Gabe, between inflation and the supply chain crisis, costs were already sky high for both farmers and shoppers. But now, get ready for heatflation. Extreme temperatures are causing lower crop yields, which means less selection and higher prices. And many ranchers are also selling off their cattle because they just can't take care of them in this heat and this drought, which also drives up costs for consumers, especially in the fall. Gabe?
Dasha Burns live for us on a sweltering farm in Missouri. Dasha, thank you. Now to the new criminal investigation just launched into those deleted Secret Service text messages that the January 6th committee has been demanding. It comes as the committee is set to hold another primetime hearing tonight. Here's Kristen Welker.
Tonight, as the January 6th committee prepares to roll out what amounts to its closing argument for now against former President Trump, the Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General revealing a criminal investigation has been launched into deleted text messages the committee requested from the Secret Service. Two sources familiar with the matter telling NBC News. The Secret Service has said there was no malicious action in the destruction of the messages, saying it was part of a pre-planned maintenance on all phones, though acknowledge agents had been asked 3 times to preserve their data. That the backdrop to tonight's high-stakes hearing, where the committee plans to recreate 187 minutes of the attack, when they say Mr. Trump waited nearly 3 hours before delivering this message to his supporters.
Go home. We love you. You're very special.
And while he said this a day later,
to those who engaged in the acts of violence and destruction, you do not represent our country.
committee members say expect to see outtakes showing what they call Mr. Trump's resistance to condemning rioters. Democrat Elaine Luria is on the committee, telling NBC's Ali Vitale.
This was a dereliction of duty of the president.
And committee member Adam Kinzinger releasing new video of White House officials, including former White House counsel Pat Cipollone, describing the president watching it all unfold.
Was the violence happened visible on the screen on the television?
Yes. And Kristen Welker joins us now from Washington. And Kristen, 2 former Trump White House officials testifying tonight?
That's right. Those 2 former officials, Gabe, are former Deputy National Security Advisor Matthew Pottinger and Sarah Matthews, a press aide. Both were at the White House on January 6th. Both were among those calling for the president to call off the rioters, and perhaps most notably, both resigned in the wake of January 6th. Expect to hear new details from them about their firsthand accounts of what the committee has called the former president's inaction as they observed it. Meanwhile, a source familiar with the matter tells me we can expect to hear new segments of former White House counsel Pat Cipollone's taped testimony, including when he urged then Chief of Staff Mark Meadows to get the president to do more. The committee signaling this could be a dramatic and emotional night. Gabe.
Kristen Welker, thank you. NBC News Now will begin special coverage of those hearings at 7:30 Eastern tonight, so stay right there. Next up, a troubling update for a family that has already been through so much pain. The 13 Turpin children abused by their parents and rescued from their home in 2018. Now 6 of those children say they were placed into abusive foster homes. They are suing the county and the foster care agency, organizations meant to protect them. Here's Miguel Almaguer.
It was a story that horrified the nation. The 13 Turpin children suffering years of abuse at the hands of their own parents.
I cannot describe in words what we went through growing up. Sometimes I still have nightmares.
Rescued in 2018 after a daring escape by one of the elder children, their parents pleaded guilty to torture, child abuse, and false imprisonment, sentenced to life in prison.
A 22-year-old was chained to a bed. They say many of the children didn't even know what a police officer was.
And now a disturbing turn of events. 6 of those children alleging they suffered physical and emotional abuse, with 5 of them alleging sexual abuse in the foster home they were placed in after their rescue.
You failed these children.
So they're now bringing civil suits against Riverside County and ChildNet, the agency that placed them. The lawsuits, which uses pseudonyms, allege the foster parents, Mr. and Mrs. O, had a prior history of abusing and neglecting children placed in their care. The suit says the children were, among other things, sexually abused, hit with a belt, endured threats that they would be returned to their biological parents, told they were worthless and should commit suicide, and even forced to eat their own vomit. It also says that officials overseeing the children's care, quote, failed to report the severe abuse and neglect.
They were told by all these saviors of theirs that we got you. You're going to be put in a good place. You don't have to worry anymore. And then when they get put with these foster parents, the foster parents tell you, oh, no, this is this is the way it is. No one will ever love you.
According to the suit, the foster parents, as well as their daughter who allegedly participated in the abuse, were arrested in March 2021 after authorities launched an investigation. The children were removed from their home.
They were already fragile due to the fact that they had been abused so horrifically before. So it just compounds.
A spokesperson for ChildNet told NBC News, quote, "We look forward to providing the facts at the appropriate time in court," adding, "We have a strong track record of providing excellent care and continue to demonstrate our commitment to these children." And a spokesman for Riverside County telling NBC News, "Our hearts go out to the Turpin siblings. We continue to evaluate our practices with a critical eye." The lawsuits do not name a financial sum for damages.
They need to be compensated for having to go through this again.
Their attorneys say it's about creating change.
These kids that have been some of the most abused children in our nation are saying, we just don't want this to happen to someone else.
And Miguel Almaguer joins us now live. And Miguel, I know you covered this story when it first broke in 2018, but these new allegations are just stunning. Do we have any updates on the Turpin children? Do we know how they're doing since they were removed from the foster home?
Well, Gabe, an attorney representing some of the adult Turpin children tell NBC News that they're doing the best they can given the circumstances. They also add that many of the children are now living in loving homes. But as you mentioned, Gabe, imagine what they went through, and now these allegations of abuse a second time, just shocking to hear, Gabe.
Miguel Almaguer live for us in Los Angeles. Miguel, thank you. Next to Top Stories news feed. And we begin with a fire breaking out on a train to Boston. Video shows the smoking Orange Line train while it was on a bridge. Passengers breaking windows to climb out of the cars. One person even jumping off the bridge and into the water. Luckily, no one was seriously injured. Officials say the fire started when part of the train came loose and hit the third rail. New York has reported its first U.S. case of polio in nearly a decade. Health officials say the young adult who lives in a New York City suburb is unvaccinated against the virus and began developing symptoms of paralysis a month ago. New York's Department of Health says it appears the patient was infected by someone who received the oral polio vaccine, which is no longer administered in the U.S. Doctors are urged to look out for more infections. And a Chicago police officer is being hailed as a hero for saving an infant who had stopped breathing. Body camera footage shows Detective Matt Lavelle arriving on the scene. The family telling him the 10-month-old lost consciousness after falling off a bed. The detective performing CPR when the baby starts breathing again and begins to cry. He was taken to the hospital. Lavelle tells Top Story tonight he visited the baby who was healthy and happy. Thanks so much for watching Top Story. For Tom Llamas, I'm Gabe Gutierrez in New York. Special coverage of the January 6th hearings begins right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.